Hi, my name is Chris Walsh, and this presentation is entitled 10 Tips for Giving an Awesome Presentation at the 2016 AATE ALEA National Conference. This is a follow-up film to a previous film which was entitled Tiny Text, Writing an Abstract. So what is going to follow is 10 really important tips for you to think about as you prepare your presentation, and also 10 tips for you to keep in mind as you're giving your presentation at the upcoming national conference. The role of schools needs to change. The school needs to act as a public space for students, teachers, and communities. The school needs to set aside the illusion that it is purely an academic and non-academic zone. The school needs to rewrite its relationship with the future. Wow, if I go to a presentation and I see someone start reading off their PowerPoint slides to me, the audience, I immediately turn off. I'm not engaged. I don't want to be there. I want to get up and leave, but I'm kind of in a catch-22 because I don't want to insult the presenter. But this is a critical mistake that so many people actually make when they give a presentation. They may have done some incredible work in their classrooms with their kids, their students, in teaching English and literacy. But what's happened is they've taken that story and they've put it down on a PowerPoint, and they basically put together the story in words rather than in a presentation. And what happens is the audience gets incredibly bored. And so one of the things that I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you 10 tips for giving a really good presentation. And the second tip, based on what you just saw, is you should never sit there with your arms at your sides and give a presentation. Rather, what you should do is command the presence, the space that you're in for the audience, and use your body and your arms and your gestures to engage the audience, to bring them to you, to get them to feel what you're saying at a level that's more of an emotional level rather than an intellectual level, like what I was doing there, which was reading to you very boring stuff from a slide. Okay. Now for tip number 1, the most important tip of all. Whatever you do, don't read from the screen. No one wants to watch you read from the screen. They want to watch you present something compelling and relevant. And the minute you do this and you start reading from the screen, the audience loses their connection with you. So it's really important. Don't read from the screen, whatever you do. And some of the upcoming tips will give you some ideas on how you can avoid reading from the screen in the first place. Tip number 2, another incredibly important tip. Engage your audience. And you do this before you start your presentation, while you're presenting, and then near the end of your presentation. And one of the ways that you can do this is to ask them a question, get them talking to one another, get them responding to something that you've actually presented. Before I start a presentation, one of the things I love to do is get the people in the audience to just turn around and introduce themselves to the person around them, to learn about what they're teaching, what level they're teaching, whether they're teaching English or they're integrating literacy or digital literacies into their classroom, etc. So just, engage your audience, ask them some questions so that they tune in to you and the really important information you're going to present. Okay, now for tip number 3. Again, this one's really important. Whatever you do, don't hide behind the podium. You need to move around, because moving around keeps the audience engaged. And if you think about the podium, if this was the podium right here, you're only going to be seeing me from here up. And what a podium often does is it stops you from using your body and your hands. So you need to get away from the podium and then move around, because that's what's going to keep the audience engaged. And go up the aisles if you have to. Go to the left, go to the right, etc. But just move around and just don't stand behind that podium, because standing behind the podium makes you turn stiff. And you don't want that for this presentation. Okay, now for tip number 4. Tell a story. Think of your presentation as a story that's going to resonate with your audience on an emotional level, where they share your excitement for your work. It's really important. Remember, you've got 20 minutes or 40 minutes to give your presentation. And what you want to do in this time is tell an exciting story where the audience is right there with you and they're excited about what you are talking about. And remember, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, now we're at tip number 5, and I love tip number 5. Tip number 5 is really fun. You need to think like a tweeter when you're designing your PowerPoint presentation or your Prezi or your keynote presentation for your presentation. So whenever possible, reduce the text on your PowerPoint slide to 140 characters and include more images, because of course the images are going to help you tell the story, but no one wants to be reading text off a PowerPoint. They've come to a presentation to hear you speak about your work. So if you think like a tweeter and you use the rule that you only have 140 characters to put in terms of print on your slide, then you're going to end up with a really awesome visual PowerPoint that you can use, and it's going to stop you from doing a few things, like tip number 1, reading from your slide. If there's not that much on your slide, you're not going to have to be turning and looking at your slide instead of talking to the audience, because those 140 words are going to basically be your prompt to tell your story. Okay, now for tip number 6. One of the most important things, and this probably goes against better judgment, I suggest you write a script for your presentation before you design it. So if you've got 20 minutes or you got 40 minutes, sit down and write exactly what you're going to plan to say in those 20 to 40 minutes. Because the slides illustrate and expand what you're going to say. So if you plan exactly what you intend to say by writing the script and then going to design the PowerPoint, you'll be able to take out the most juicy bits from the script and put them in your 140 characters on your PowerPoint slide, and then you'll be able to practice your script further on in the future. Okay, now we're at tip number 7, and this one too is really important. One of the things that you should do is practice your script that you wrote in tip 6 like crazy to anyone who will listen. Practicing your script gives you a chance to tell your story, and you know that every time you tell a story, when you tell it again, you're that much better. So if you have your script and you just practice telling that story over and over, I would say 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, maybe even more until you've got it. And then you put your script down, and then you use your PowerPoint, and then you practice your presentation. And because you've written that script and then practiced it, you're going to know it, and you're going to know it well. And if you make a mistake when you're presenting, no one's going to know unless you tell them that you've made a mistake. So if you stumble over something, so what? Just keep on going. No one's going to know, because you've got your script and you've got your PowerPoint to help you, but you're not relying on your PowerPoint in this way. All right, now with tip number 8. Tip number 8, if you think about making eye contact with your audience, you're going to have to do something very different. Right now, I'm pretty far away from my audience, except for these 2 folks. But if I'm going to make eye contact, what I need to do, I need to walk, I need to move around, think of the other tip, and I need to come close to different audience members and actually make eye contact. Because when you're presenting your work or your research, what you're trying to do is persuade the audience to believe that it's important and relevant. So looking them in the eye helps you make your argument about why what you have done, the work in your classroom or your research, is really, really important. Tip 9. Remember, you are telling a story, so you need to act like it by commanding the space that you are presenting in by using your hands and your body and making really big gestures. Now, if you're in a lecture theater, when you're giving a presentation, you might be up at the front with people all the way at the back in a kind of darkened room. It's going to be really important to use your body to command this space and make big gestures as you are telling your story. Okay, now, so we're ready for a final tip. And I think this tip is also really important. You need to use the language in your presentation to compel your audience to feel a certain way. So use adjectives to get the audience to feel the way you want them to feel about your story. And I always suggest using big words like "it was awesome," "the students were excited," "it had an amazing impact," because if you do that, your audience is going to feel compelled to agree with you about what you just presented. So if you're using these adjectives throughout your presentation, you compel your audience to feel a certain way. If you're using all of the other 9 tips plus this one together in planning and delivering your presentation, I think you're going to be really, really well off and prepared to give an awesome presentation going forward. So I hope you enjoyed these 10 tips, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the National Conference.